It's easy to be down on Anthony Richardson. It's easy to label him or put him in a box as a project player who is talented but needs a lot of work. That's the general consensus on him, but it's wrong. He doesn't need a lot of work. He'll benefit from improved mechanics, but even as he is, he's a very, very good NFL quarterback prospect. You obviously can't ignore his throwing motion. It's as ugly as they get. He drops the ball as low as Tim Tebow did to create an elongated, loose wind-up. And he often releases the ball when he's too far forward over his front foot so that his back foot comes off the ground before the ball leaves his hand. On this play, his motion causes him to miss a screen throw. When you have a motion as ugly as this, it leads to wild misses. You can find plenty of examples of Richardson making wild throws on all different types of passes. These misses linger longer in the mind than more routine misses do, and that can often fool us into thinking the quarterback is missing more often than a quarterback whose bad plays are less egregious. Richardson is actually a very accurate passer. There are different elements that factor into his low completion percentage, like his poor supporting cast and the types of throws he attempts. If his next coaching staff tweaks his mechanics a small bit, he could become an elite passer overall. It's similar to how Patrick Mahomes came out of college. Andy Reid cleaned up some of the looseness in his mechanics, but didn't force him away from what felt natural for him. The Chiefs have benefited massively from finding that balance. Richardson might be the next Mahomes, but his skill set at Florida looked a lot more like Cam Newton's. When you think Cam Newton, you think huge arm and an incredible runner. Richardson has those traits, but he also has the well-rounded technical skill set that Newton boasted throughout his career. It's what makes him a different prospect to the likes of, say, Malik Willis. We'll get to the deep bombs of running plays later. Let's first break down Richardson's brain. He excels at moving within the pocket to mitigate pressure. Here we see Florida set up in shotgun. The tight end to the top of the screen is going to stay into block. The running back will execute a quick play fake but release into a route. Although the offense has a 6-man protection against a 4-man rush, the defense is going to create a matchup advantage by having a defensive end against that tight end alone in space. That tight end does a decent job to hold the defender up initially and stay attached, but he can't stop him from getting to the quarterback at the top of his drop. Richardson can see the defender in his eye line, so he moves early. His lower body moves perfectly so that he slides forward and slightly to the inside, so he reaches a point where he's equidistant to all the defenders in the middle of the pocket. We can see how the defensive end is at the exact spot where Richardson was at the top of his drop. Richardson's eyes stayed downfield throughout this action, and the time he bought himself allowed the route combinations to develop downfield so that his crossing route is wide open. The quarterback drops an accurate ball into his receiver for what ultimately becomes a routine looking play for the offense that was really created by the quarterback. Richardson can be a little frenetic in his movement behind the line of scrimmage at times, which makes him look unorthodox and more out of control than he actually is. If you watch him enough, you realise that his awareness of the pressure around him is extremely high and he's very comfortable adjusting to it. This is a shot play against Tennessee where the 3 receivers releasing into routes all work vertically on deep routes while the running back and tight end stay into block after a play fake. The defense is only rushing 4 players after the quarterback, but when we switch to the end zone angle and roll the play on, we can see the tight end is beaten instantly off the snap. Richardson is lucky that he has his running back in the perfect spot to deter the defensive end, but he also knows that his teammate isn't going to win that matchup. The running back only serves to widen the defensive end's route to the quarterback, but he still reaches Richardson at the top of his drop. Richardson reacts in good time, stepping forward into the space in the middle of the pocket and cutting off the angle the edge rushers had to reach him at the top of his drop. Once he's clear of the first wave of the pass rush, he has 2 interior defenders taking away running lanes. The first defender to his right has outside leverage, so Richardson has to move in the opposite direction, but if he goes too far that way, he'll put himself at the mercy of the other defensive tackle. He is a little bit hectic in his movement, which means he goes a little bit too far in each direction, but critically, his eyes stay downfield and he never runs himself into the pass rush fully. That allows him to locate and connect with his receiver deep down the right sideline for a big play that the receiver then turns into a touchdown after the catch. Richardson has great technical foundation as a quarterback. You can clearly see him playing with a process and reacting to what the defense does rather than predetermining his decision making based on what he wants to do rather than what is best for the offense for him to do. Here against FSU, we see an example of him reading the front side of the coverage, moving in the pocket with greater control, and locating his open receiver on the backside for a big play. The ball is on the right hash mark, and Richardson's 2 slot receivers are going to run crossing routes to the wide side on the left. They're complemented by vertical releases outside the numbers on either side of the field. The defense is rushing 4 and playing cover 1 with a linebacker in zone coverage over the middle and a safety in deep coverage behind him. Richardson hits the top of a deep drop so that both edge rushers are encouraged upfield. They show their athleticism to pursue him quickly without coming off the edge out of control. This means they can redirect when Richardson steps forward into the space in the middle of the pocket. Richardson does everything right, but he can't locate an open receiver on the front side of the play. He reaches a point in the play where he's bracketed by 2 defenders with seemingly nowhere to go and his eyes drop. But Richardson's awareness and athleticism allows him to sprint forward at an angle past the defensive tackle so that he can look to the backside of the play and avoid the pass rush. Richardson's awareness and controlled movement allowed the offense to gain more than 20 yards, despite the coverage holding up well and the pass rush winning its matchups. Labeling a quarterback as an athlete or a project creates a perception of him. That typically includes being a one-read quarterback who can't diagnose coverages, a player whose first instinct is to run when he's pressured or faces a threatening alignment before the snap. On this play, Richardson faces a 3rd and 6 inside his own half. The offense has spread the field with 3 receivers working the narrow side and a slant flat combination on the wide side. Richardson is in empty and knows he has no extra protection, so the ball has to come out quickly if the defense blitzes or disguises their pass rush. That's exactly what they do. Tennessee show a double A gap blitz with both linebackers standing over the centre on the line of scrimmage, but they're dropping into a cover 3 zone while blitzing the cornerback on the narrow side of the field to the top of the screen. When the ball is snapped, Richardson locates the blitz and throws into it for the wide open first down. He diagnosed the coverage and beat the blitz. Let's look at this play from the end zone angle to get a full feel of what Richardson did. Against this type of front, the quarterback is more likely to be hit, and hit while he's in a more vulnerable position. It's also intimidating in a football sense, because the defense lining up like this means they're chasing a big play. The aggressiveness means the quarterback is more likely to make an egregious error. Luckily for us, Richardson has a white line going through the back of his helmet. That helps us tell where he looks after the ball is snapped. We can see how the line goes left as his eyes go right when he catches the ball. With the pressure look up front, Richardson's first option is the slant. It attacks a space the linebackers would vacate if they blitzed, and it's a catch and release throw for the quarterback, so he won't invite pressure by holding the ball and waiting for it to come open. Richardson isn't looking directly at the slant. He's checking if the linebacker to that side of the centre blitzed or dropped into coverage. Since he drops into coverage, Richardson knows straight away that the slant isn't an option. While this all looks slow because we've slowed the play down to see how it develops, Richardson's eye movement is actually rapid here, and that allows him to be reading in behind the blitzing cornerback long before he's under any pressure. He has 2 wide open routes underneath, but he has to make sure the cornerback outside commits to the sideline route before he throws the ball. The flat route is more open than the outbreaking route, but the outbreaking route gives the offense a first down, so that's where Richardson goes with the ball. If we quickly compare Richardson's process in empty compared to Will Levis's process in empty, we can see the massive difference between their eyes. Levis locks onto his first read and appears confused by it, leading to him holding the ball and taking a massive hit. Richardson scans the field quickly, so the defense is never close to making a play against him. Going back to the FSU game, we can see an example of Richardson manipulating a defender in coverage to create an opening for his receiver downfield. The offense has drawn up a shot play with 7 players staying in pass protection after a play fake in the backfield. The remaining 3 receivers are all running deep routes. Defensively, FSU sends 4 players initially, including one of their off-ball linebackers, and the edge rusher at the top of the screen will chase the quarterback early in the play because he recognises the tight end across from him is staying in pass protection. Richardson is going to connect with this slot receiver who can be seen towards the top of the screen, but he's not going to look there early in the play. During his drop back, Richardson's eyes are squarely on the middle of the field. He's on the near hash mark, so if he's looking along that line, he's holding the deep safety to the receiver who released from the bottom of the screen. After doing that for a prolonged moment, we can then clearly see Richardson reset his feet and turn his shoulders so he looks to the wide side of the field on his right side. Richardson's slot receiver is streaking down the middle of the field. The deep safety has been moved out of that area by the quarterback's eyes, so the door is open for the 43-yard touchdown. When Richardson's pass hits the receiver in stride, it's all made to look very easy. Project quarterbacks don't make that play. Against Georgia, we get to see Richardson make the same play and complement it with a perfectly thrown deep ball into tight coverage. It's the same play design, but from a slightly different formation. This time, the slot receiver on the right side of the field is closer to the right tackle rather than the receiver outside of him. Georgia are going to send their whole defensive front after the quarterback, leaving the secondary in man coverage with a single high safety. Before we begin the play, note where that safety is positioned. He's split to the top of the screen despite the ball being directly in the middle of the field, not on either hash mark. Richardson keeps his eyes on the safety throughout his drop back. He plants his feet and is still looking in the safety's direction when he reaches the top of his drop. We can then see how he resets his feet to turn to the left sideline and look for his receiver running deep. These are subtle movements, but they impact the positioning of the deep safety and, more importantly, the catch point for the receiver. As the ball flies through the air, we can see the safety lingering in the middle of the field instead of closing to help his cornerback outside the numbers. The cornerback is still in great coverage, but Richardson has the arm talent, accuracy, and touch to drop the ball into a window that is barely bigger than the ball itself. The replay angle shows us just how tight the margins were for Richardson here. This is an elite throw that most quarterbacks don't have the capability of making. Richardson has an incredibly strong arm, but his arm talent also extends to making touch and timing passes into tight windows too. There's not a throw he can't make. This is another shot play with a 7-man protection and 2 receivers releasing into deep routes against Utah, but this ball is going to fall incomplete. One thing that needs to be understood about the Florida offense is that the receivers weren't very good. They often struggled to separate, they regularly didn't get to the right spot in time on some good throws, and offered Richardson essentially no margin for error at the catch point. Pressure off the edge forces Richardson to reset outside of the pocket before unleashing his throw downfield. He releases the ball from his own 39-yard line, 11 yards behind the line of scrimmage. His receiver does a good job here to get in behind the coverage initially down the right sideline, but the pressure disrupted the timing of the play, so he's now too far away for Richardson to hit him in stride or lay the ball out in front of him. But Richardson's ability to push the ball that far downfield still gives his receiver a chance at making a play on the ball. His throw would be 61 yards if it was in a straight line. With the angle, it's probably more of a 70-yard throw. The ball is well placed and sustains velocity to the end. All he needed from his receiver here was to meet the ball at its highest point and work back to it. But instead, he waited and hoped it would somehow go through the defender and arrive down at his hip. That obviously didn't work. But of course, there's plenty of completions we can use to showcase Richardson's quality as a passer too. This touchdown throw against LSU has done the rounds because of how impressive it is. It's another shot play, but this time Richardson will turn his back to execute the play fake as the offensive line blocks left and the tight end pulls across to be Richardson's primary blocker on the front side of the play. Defensively, LSU are set up to stop deep throws with two safeties splitting the middle of the field and man coverage outside. The play fake and extra pass protection works perfectly. Richardson has all the time and space he needs to let the play develop downfield and wait for his moment to strike. He's 6 yards behind the line of scrimmage as he releases the ball. Richardson let the ball go from his own 43-yard line, and there isn't really an angle here, so it's a true 58-yard throw that arrives just inside the end zone. He hits his receiver in stride. The throw itself here is phenomenal, but the read that Richardson makes offers a secondary reason to be impressed. Richardson reads the right side safety while the other safety widens in the opposite direction. That safety is then drawn to the crossing route just underneath his zone. He signals to the opposite safety to cover over the top for him, but that safety is too far upfield to play over the top. Richardson knew this and he knew he could hit the post route behind him safely. Richardson has an aggressive mindset, but he's not a reckless passer. He's a very smart passer. On 4th and 2, Tennessee know that Florida want to try and get the high percentage throw or run the ball for the first down. So they put all 11 defenders at the line of scrimmage and dare Richardson to throw the ball past them. Richardson doesn't waver when the ball is snapped. He drops back and immediately looks at his widest receiver on the wide side of the field. Tennessee have 3 zone defenders in the middle of the field and everyone else is in single coverage. It's somewhat counterintuitive, but the highest percentage throw here is the deep shot. Richardson understands this and almost leisurely hits his receiver downfield. This may as well have been a slant for all the effort that he put into the play. The Tennessee defense should have known better here because it wasn't the first time that Richardson made throwing deep look easy in that game. In the first quarter, Florida used what should be a familiar looking shot play designed by this stage of the video before Richardson holds a deep safety to then rip the ball to his receiver behind the coverage down the right sideline. It's smooth execution from everyone involved. Against FSU, we have another 7-man protection shot play, but this time we're going to see the pocket break down as Richardson delivers the ball. The running back and tight end stay in protection to set the edge. That part is safe, but a linebacker picks his way through the middle of the offensive line to get to Richardson as the ball is coming out. Richardson's eyes never drop. He goes through his process, hits the top of his drop, and steps forward before beginning his throwing motion. He's fully focused on the coverage downfield and his timing with his receiver. His punishment for that is a big hit from the defender who arrives to hit him as the ball comes out of his hand. But the reward comes moments later as his pass hits the receiver in stride behind the coverage for a 52-yard touchdown. These bombs are always fun to watch and they're an important part of a quarterback's skill set. You have to be able to punish the defense vertically and Richardson does that. But he also has functional arm strength. One of the most important and often most overlooked throws in terms of difficulty that an NFL quarterback needs to make is the out route on 3rd and long. This is 3rd and 10 against Kentucky and the ball is on the right hash mark. Kentucky use an alignment that is very popular in the NFL on 3rd and long. They're showing an aggressive blitz with 6 defenders on the line of scrimmage and a 7th loitering just behind them as another potential pass rusher. The rest of the defense is lined up in off-man coverage. The idea here is the blitz forces the ball to come out quickly, which means a short throw, so the coverage can then come forward to make a tackle short of the first down line and get the ball back. Richardson has only one option here that can get him a first down. It's an out route on the wide side of the field to the top of the screen. If we roll the play on, we see Richardson hit the top of his drop, but there's an unblocked rusher coming from his blind side. This means there's now a window for him to release the ball until he's sacked. That window will close before the wide receiver at the top of the screen can even enter his break to turn to the outside. You can see the receiver is still a step away from starting to turn at the top of the screen. This position is so dangerous because the cornerback is perfectly positioned to undercut the ball if it's underthrown even slightly or if it's placed too far to the inside. Richardson can't wait to see his receiver come open. He has to throw the ball with anticipation or he'll be sacked. Despite the precarious scenario, Richardson delivers the ball with good technique. His strong delivery allows him to push the ball past the defender and connect with his receiver for the first down. This isn't an obvious highlight play, but it tells us a lot about the quality of quarterback that Richardson is. It's so easy for something to go wrong in this situation. He navigated it perfectly. Now we know that Richardson has high-end arm talent. We know that he can diagnose coverages to hit big plays against pressure, and make inch-perfect timing throws to keep the offense on the field. The last thing we need to know about his arm strength is how he throws on the move. Again against Kentucky, Florida put Richardson in pistol and used play action to flow him to the right side of the pocket. He has an intermediate crossing route, a post route running deep, and a wheel route going down the right sideline. The play works exactly as it's drawn up. The defensive end to the top of the screen jumps inside, so Richardson finds space to work in outside. He connects with his receiver down the right sideline, and critically, he leads him away from trouble. The ball forces his receiver to drift towards the sideline as he catches the ball, instead of leading him upfield or inwards. Richardson stopped his receiver, so he was equidistant between the arriving deep safety and the trailing cornerback underneath. He protected him. Against Georgia late in the fourth quarter, we see this precision and understanding of the defense's leverage once again as he hits the back shoulder throw deep down the left sideline to exploit the coverage of the cornerback. His ball couldn't be better placed if he walked up and put it in the right spot for his teammate. This reiterates his understanding of leverage and how to attack the coverage while protecting his receivers. If Richardson goes to a coaching staff that sets him up for success, they will put an emphasis on shot plays. But don't be confused into thinking that Richardson is just a big arm. He's also an exquisite touch passer. On this play, the offense is going to only release 3 receivers into routes again, but it's not really a shot play. It's a half-field read where the offense attacks every level of the coverage with one receiver. The outside receiver runs an intermediate route, the inside receiver runs a deep route, and the running back runs to the flat. Defensively, Tennessee are sending a 4-man rush and are joined by the linebacker on the wide side who shoots forward when he sees the 7-man protection. That 7-man protection gives Richardson time in the pocket that he needs because the routes are slow developing. The way in which the coverage responds puts the intermediate route in space, so that's the route that Richardson has to throw the ball to. He drops the ball slightly too far ahead of his receiver, but critically he arches the ball and takes some velocity off of it so the receiver is able to pull it in. Richardson understands that just because he has a huge arm, it's not a good idea to throw every ball with as much velocity as he can. That doesn't mean his arm talent doesn't help him on touch throws, of course. This play against FSU is particularly impressive. You'll notice the route combinations here are somewhat similar to the previous play. The intermediate route is a crossing route that comes from the opposite side of the field this time, and the flat route is a receiver in motion rather than a running back. But the most important difference is the running back to Richardson's right. He releases into a route as well this time. It's a 6-man protection rather than a 7-man protection, and the tight end who stays into block is left one-on-one with the defensive end to the top of the screen. That defensive end reaches Richardson at the top of his drop. Richardson can't step up to evade him because he has to maintain the timing of the play with his receiver downfield. The window in the zone will close if he holds the ball too long. We can see that Richardson is throwing the ball off his back foot and being hit as the ball comes out. Despite this, he still manages to flight the ball perfectly to his receiver in a tight space between 2 zone defenders. If he gets this wrong, it's liable to be intercepted. The receiver reaches up for the ball when he shouldn't. He had time to let it come into his chest so he could protect the ball better. This is ultimately what leads to him dropping the ball as he goes to ground. All 5 of Richardson's receivers are releasing into routes on this play. The defense is showing a 4-man rush with 3 down linemen and 1 defender pressing the line of scrimmage between the tackles. The defender is a key player here because he's actually going to drop into a deep zone in the middle of the field. The defense is only rushing 3 so they can crowd the coverage behind it. Against a 3-man rush, you want your quarterback to hold the ball in the pocket, stay centrally, and scan the field for as long as he can. If nothing comes open, you want him to move so that he changes the launch point of the pass. This changes the angles that he can throw to his receivers. That's exactly what Richardson does on this occasion. There isn't a wide open receiver. Richardson has to fit the ball over a linebacker who is directly in the passing lane, and at the same time drop it in between 3 defenders surrounding the receiver at the catch point. This is an outstanding throw and a great example of Richardson reacting appropriately to the call of the defense. It's the kind of play you can use to differentiate between refined, technically astute quarterbacks and athletes who control the ball somewhat. Richardson is a very good athlete and a great runner, but he doesn't default to running the ball. He is a pass-first quarterback who chooses to run after he has exhausted all options as a passer. This touchdown run against Utah highlights this. It's a familiar concept as Florida draw up the same shot play design with 7 players in protection and 2 receivers working vertically downfield. Richardson executes the play fake and hits the top of his drop. He has to move off his spot and reset up in the pocket to regenerate the integrity of his protection. He does that and settles instead of immediately looking to run. His eyes are downfield where he is reading the far side linebacker to determine if his crossing route will come open or not. You can see what Richardson sees in the top right corner. Nothing is going to come open. Richardson doesn't hesitate in transitioning from his passing posture to sprinting towards space. He's aware of his surroundings, so he knows exactly where the running lane is. With the coverage all pulled to the opposite side of the field, Richardson is able to run all the way down the sideline before being confronted by a defender whom he beats easily to extend the play into the end zone for the touchdown. One of the common misconceptions of Cam Newton throughout his career was that he was a scrambling quarterback. Most of Newton's running plays were designed runs. He was very much an eyes-up passer who used his athleticism to keep passing plays alive before scrambling when it was the best or the last option. Richardson doesn't have the towering height or overall size that Newton had, but his running style is very similar, and nobody since him has mixed power, speed and vision at the quarterback position like he did until Richardson came along. The Georgia defense wasn't full of NFL defenders, but it was full of NFL caliber athletes and some players who will go on to be NFL superstars. This play best captures the full running skill set and athleticism of Richardson. As they generally did, Georgia relied on its 4-man defensive line to get after the quarterback. quarterback. Florida released all 5 eligible receivers into routes, so Richardson had no extra protection and had to manage the pocket himself. Richardson hits the top of his drop and his eyes are downfield, but the edge rusher is pushing his right tackle back into his lap. He buys time by sliding away from the pressure without dropping his eyes or abandoning his passing posture. But the defensive end keeps working through his block. Richardson has to adjust again by gaining depth to then run around the corner and escape into the flat. His eyes are downfield from the moment he hits open space. He turns the corner around the second defender, still looking upfield before committing to the scramble. He makes the next defender miss with a decisive step before baiting the next 2 defenders by making it look as if he's going to lower his shoulder to try and get the first down. This is a great run. The transition from passing posture to escaping and the decisiveness he showed while acting on his awareness of what was around him is very Newton-esque. Georgia comfortably beat Florida because they were a better team in almost every way, but they didn't enjoy dealing with Richardson's skill set. This is a read option keeper where the player in motion acts as a lead blocker for Richardson, but his blocker runs past the wider defender. There's an inside defender forcing Richardson wide, and the wider defender has an angle on him, so this play should be dead behind the line of scrimmage. It's not dead, and that's because Richardson is able to outrun the angle of that defender before turning the corner. This time he does power through the first tackler when he hits open space, spinning off of him so that he can make a second power move and finish the play well past the first down line. That combination of burst and power makes Richardson so difficult to contain. It helps him keep passing plays alive too when it looks like he should be trapped for a sack. For this 4th and 1, the offense is trying to get Richardson into space by bootlegging him out of the pocket. It's a very aggressive call and one the defense doesn't fall for. When Richardson turns around, he has a defensive back in a perfect contained position. Richardson should have nowhere to go here. There is a receiver in the flat who leaked out uncovered. He is open, but there is a defender just off screen who could still step forward instead of stepping back to become a factor at the catch point. By extending the play around the cornerback in the backfield, Richardson forces that defender behind his flat route to drop deeper into his zone coverage. That takes him out of the play and leaves the tight end wide open for the first down completion. Richardson didn't play in a very good offense in college, and he will have to endure learning curves after he's drafted the same as any other quarterback. He would benefit from the Patrick Mahomes plan where he isn't forced into the starting lineup straight away, but he's a prospect who just needs to clean up some things. He's not someone who needs to be built from the ground up or an athlete who doesn't know how to play the position. He's ready for the NFL, and a good franchise will help him kick on to realise his potential as a star quarterback in the league. Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson are the 2 best quarterback prospects in this draft by a significant distance.